Thanks very much. Thanks for your presentation. And you made a comment there that this is a very complex piece of legislation, and indeed it is. And it just strikes me that there's a lot of accountancy trickery going on here. I could be wrong, and I don't want to make a wrong accusation, but it needs a lot of explanation. And when it does come to being scrutinised, it's going to require a huge amount of legislation. It's extraordinary how a complex piece of legislation is applied to something as simple as massive increases in people's bills, while at the same time massive increases in the profits of the companies who are issuing the bills. That's a simple thing that has happened, but the legislation to address it has to be extraordinarily complex. So I have a couple of questions for you on it, and one is to ask you the same as I did the representative from the European Union. There seems to be an anomaly in the description about whether or not losses from previous years would be taken into account when calculating the TSC, as you called it, because the heads of bill seem to suggest that losses can be taken into account, and certainly that losses and capital expenditure will be taken into account when calculating for corporation tax. So somewhere along the line, is the tax not being reduced? What comes back to the state is being reduced by these accountancy mechanisms that are being put into the bill. Now, you look confused at me asking the question, but I'm extremely confused by reading the document, so that's why I'm asking you that question. The other thing I'd like to ask about is crew. I mean, we've had crew in here at loads and loads of committee meetings to discuss with them and to delve down into what was going on, particularly when the bills were rising and there was at different points threat to the delivery of energy during the winter months. And I've just asked myself, are crew fit to be involved in this checking on the hedging? Not that there's nothing wrong with them, but they clearly indicated to us on various occasions the lack of resources. For example, they're not, a very simple example, they're not either capable or involved in regulating the district heating market, which is a market that very extraordinarily penalises people who live within district heating systems over and above what the rest of us have to endure in the energy market. And they people who are in that system can't shop around, so they don't have the advantage of being told, "Oh, go off and find a cheaper company that'll deliver your electricity." So that's just a question both for crew and for yourselves. Is this appropriate? Are they fit? Are they resourced enough? Are they fit to be able to deliver that? And finally, my last question. The Electricity Association of Ireland have said they will resist any attempt by the state to impose a windfall tax on their profits, because they say it could deter investment in the future for the investment that's needed in the renewable energy. Now, that speaks volumes to me in terms of the nonsense of having private companies dictate an energy market which is crucial to everything else we do. I believe, and have said this repeatedly here, that energy should be in public control and not for profit, and run on the basis of what the country and the system needs, not for the profits of these companies. But having said that, I would like to ask you, when you said in your submission, and you made reference to stakeholders, were the Electricity Energy Association of Ireland consulted about this? And would you agree with their narrative that this could be risky for investment into the future?
Just Deputy Smith, just on the first point, it is a complex piece of legislation. So while this is a levy, it's applying to taxable profits. So inevitably, we have to be cognizant of the tax code, and there's a fair bit of engagement with the Revenue Commissioner. So there is a lot of complexity involved, and that's the case. And you can see the complexity even within the regulation itself, the EU regulation. Marina.
Deputy, I'll take your first question just on the losses. So in the regulation under Article 15, the contribution applies to taxable profits under national tax rules. So if Ireland were to implement the contribution in accordance with corporation tax rules as they are now, due to the nature of the sectors and their history, we will collect little, if any, contribution due to the amount of losses carrying forward from previous years. So in in the recital 55 of the regulation, it does provide that member states are to implement fully the contribution and may account for the treatment of losses in previous years. So in the government decision in 22, the government decided the losses from previous years would not be included. This has the effect that companies cannot reduce or cannot offset their losses from previous years against the contribution, resulting in a lower collection by the state. In the general scheme, we have put losses from before 2018 cannot be carried forward into the period, and they cannot be carried back from 2023. So losses within the 2018 to 23 period can be brought forward, or as you have said, but the reason for losses pre-18 not being included was to maximise the return of the windfall gain to the state. I hope that answers.
Well, you've certainly done a great job at answering it, but I don't understand it. And I look around me and I wonder, does anybody here really understand it on this side of the house? I don't know, but we'll find out as we go through this process. But you've certainly done your best to try and address it.
It is mainly that, as under normal corporation tax, companies can offset their tax bill from losses from previous years. So if we had implemented those same rules, there would be little, if any, collection of TSC by the state, which is why we have catered for the treatment of losses in previous years.
Okay, I'm sure we'll be teasing it out in the future. Thanks for that answer. But is there other questions?
Just on the Electricity Association of Ireland. So yeah, I did consult with them. So we had stakeholder engagement with about, I think, all of the main representative bodies. So that would be Wind Energy Ireland, EAI, IBEC, and the Irish Wind Farm Association. In addition to those representative bodies, and there was individual firms as well, but they were all taken together. So there would have been about at least 30 entities per stakeholder engagement. EAI were on the call. Look, we've made clear in both the regulatory impact assessment and in the briefing, kind of a summary of the views, and it's obvious that the views of the sector will differ from the objectives of the government at the time, which is to capture the windfall gain. In terms of will windfall gains, like you asked, do we agree with the view of EAI, will windfall gains, or will a windfall tax basically deter future investment? So we've looked at many cases of windfall taxes, at least where there's an ex post evaluation across many jurisdictions and across different sectors. So, you know, from the banking windfall tax under Margaret Thatcher's government, right up to energy windfall taxes in Australia in 2008. So we looked at about 10 sort of case studies where there's clear ex post evaluations. The evidence is mixed, really, in terms of, like, there's a strong assertion always when you talk about windfall, even if you're passing interest in windfall taxes, that, well, if you implement windfall taxes, you'll definitely deter investment. It's a lot more nuanced and complex than that. You know, it depends on the degree to which you can actually capture the windfall. So just like if you were to define a windfall, it's the excess return above, and it's excess above the normal expected return. So as long as you're targeting the excess return above what was expected, you should really limit the impact on future investment. But also then the time period is very important. So if you have a temporary, clearly defined windfall intervention, that would limit the long-term effect on the investment. I think that's what we've done here. We've clearly tried to identify where there is windfall gains, that would have been in excess of expected returns, as reflected by what the wind farms would have got for their refit prices. We've only targeted the revenue above that, and it's clear that this is temporary and time bound. So I think we've done everything possible and in line with the previous literature and case studies in mitigating the
just on that,
risk.
can I ask you then, arising from what you've told me, you've had several stakeholders, 9 or something different stakeholders at a meeting, and one of them was
about 30.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And one of them was the Electricity Association.
Yeah.
Now, what sector do they represent? Am I right in saying it's mainly the fossil fuel sector that they represent?
No. So I wouldn't speak specifically on who they represent fully, but they represent supplier firms as well, and it seems that they represent like electricity generation firms as well.
And just related to that then, would the other stakeholders have the same view as them, that this is detrimental to future investment and they want to resist it?
Yeah, in summary, like if I could give 2 points which I've given in the briefing, the summary of the stakeholder views, let's say, would be that the 2 most common themes were, you know, the 120 is too low, it should be higher, that's going to create country-specific risk, and if we do create country-specific risk, well, that will negatively impact on future investment. That would be the summary of, I suppose, the stakeholder, the stakeholder concerns in the submissions. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. My last question was on crew.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, Deputy. In terms of CRU's role in administrating the market revenue cap, this legislation will require generators and other market entities covered by the cap to submit self-declarations to us, and that should lay out their market revenue, their capped revenue, which they get to keep under the market revenue cap, and then their hedging operations, so both gains and losses from hedging operations, and then that will feed into the final amount owed under the cap. And then we will, once we get all those self-declarations, should be by the end of July, we will cross-check with SEMO Airgrid on the market data to see if the self-declarations are accurate and comprehensive. And then we'll also have expert consultancy or support to help us review the self-declarations to see if the hedging operations meet the conditions in the legislation and if the gains and losses are applicable. And we also have the ability to ask for further information where there's uncertainty or we don't think they've provided all the information.
So crew believe they're adequately resourced to deal with this?
Yeah.
And to deal with it thoroughly so that there's no, this hedging is transparent to us all?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.